Good evening, everyone. I see our participants are starting to log on. We'll get started in a few minutes. And in the meantime, if you are somebody that wants to access the closed captioned, it has been enabled. You can open that up for yourself in the bottom bar or the top bar, depending on where that is on your computer. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joyce Connell. I'm the counseling coordinator. We will get started in about 2 minutes. I just wanted to let you all know that we are recording this event this evening, and it will be on the school's YouTube channel. The live closed captioning has been enabled, so if anybody's interested in accessing that, you can do that through your own bar at the bottom of your screen. And we'll get started in a minute. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joyce Connell. I'm the school counseling coordinator, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening to present information on jumpstarting the college admissions process. I'm joined here this evening by Megan Bradley, Rebecca Castellano, Allison Winston, and Cheryl Thomas is unavailable this evening. However, she is extending her well wishes to all the families who will be beginning this process, and she's eager to get started with you as well. Tonight's program is being recorded, so for those of you who want to take a look back at it, or if a child or a neighbor or a friend was unable to view it this evening, it will be on our school's YouTube channel. Also, the live transcription closed captioning has been enabled, so if anybody needs access to that, you can get set up at the bottom of your screen on the tab. If you have any questions, you're welcome to insert them in the Q&A feature, which has also been enabled. As we go through the presentation, the counselors will keep an eye on those questions. If some of those questions relate to the information that we're sharing at the time, we will address those questions. Some of those questions may end up being answered throughout the presentation, so we may pass on some of those questions. And then again at the evening, end of the evening rather, we will conclude by closing out any other questions or continuing having a conversation with those people who want to add questions in the Q&A feature. So at this time, I think we'll get started. The first slide actually is really just to speak to you about what tonight's presentation is going to look like. like. So one of the things that we're doing this evening is trying to help families understand about the variety of resources and future learning opportunities that will be available to the families. Pardon me, I'm sorry, I'm having a little issue with my slide there. There we go. And to provide guidance around the role that we all take in the college process. We're here to share information regarding myths and trends and feedbacks that we've received from college admissions representatives from around the country throughout the year and in our collective experience. It is my pleasure to turn the program over to Ms. Winston, who will now begin our presentation. Ms. Winston.
Thank you, Mrs. Connell. I'm Allie Winston. I'm one of the school counselors, and we'll be meeting with our students, our junior students, beginning February 6th. So we will be discussing course selection for junior year, but in addition to that, we'll also be working on and discussing the college planning process. So this will include reviewing the college admissions handbook, which we have linked here. It is also linked to our school website, and we'll have it linked to our Schoology page. It includes a plethora of information about the college admissions process, including a calendar and timeline we'll talk about more in depth later on. We'll review other important resources students should utilize throughout the process, including checking our Schoology page, the class of 2024 for important updates and information, as well as Naviance. Students will be shown how to perform a college search, their first college search, and how to access career and personality assessments to help direct them in their college search. The next slide is the calendar I mentioned earlier, featured in the admissions handbook. And as I said, this will look differently for everyone. This is kind of a very generic framework for the college admissions planning calendar and framework. Students and counselors will work together to make this calendar and timeline more specific to each individual student, their goals, their needs. However, you may want to take a look at some of the more important items that you should be taking care of in junior year, especially doing your college research, visiting college campuses, consider registering for standardized tests, of course, have that discussion with your counselor, taking advantage of summer opportunities, have a volunteer experience, have a summer job, have an internship experience. And once again, this is a generic timeline, and it will look differently for each student. I'll now turn it over to Ms. Bradley, who will speak to the counseling website and some other of the resources that we will use to communicate with students and families and give important updates and information.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ms. Winston. I'm Megan Bradley. For those of you who don't know me, I am new to Pleasantville High School. I have done this college process for a few years. So this page right here is a one-stop shop really for everything college admissions and post-secondary. So whatever your plans are, like Ms. Winston said, every post-secondary journey is so different. So this is a really great website to use, the counseling tab. We have the handbook that Ms. Winston spoke to, and the recommendation packet that we'll go over at some point, interview tips, college application guide. There's so much that, is really worth noting here and taking a look. It's housed in the same place and updated frequently. So definitely use this to your advantage. Next is our forms of communication. We're trying to, stay as well as email. We obviously communicate mostly with families through email, but we recently created an Instagram page. Our handle, if you can see it, is at @Pville_school counseling. We would love a follow if you'd like to follow us. This is a new account for us, but we've already got it up and running. I just posted some midterm exam reducing stress tips today. And then throughout, this will be really helpful for the college admissions process too. We're planning on posting rep visits, events that are coming up, workshops, anything that we're really doing in the counseling office will be housed on Instagram, as well as our page on Schoology. So this is really our main communication line through the class of 2024, which has been enabled since their freshman year. And this is where we post events, updates, things that need to get done, meetings. You can see on this page a meeting with counselor. You can make a meeting with one of us right on the Schoology page. We post, I know that there's an event coming up on February 8th, the panel presentation, which you can see right there. So these are really important and really helpful to stay up to date on. So I definitely recommend checking both of these platforms, frequently, as you do not want to miss out on anything we have coming up. And lastly, we have a platform called Naviance. Many of you probably have already heard of it and already used it. This has been used throughout high school for students, primarily through college and career planning. So usually 9th and 10th graders also use Naviance. This year, it's more so focusing on the college admissions process. And we will really be helping students navigate Naviance, through this process. This is going to be a key platform to use for requesting transcripts to be sent, requesting recommendation letters. Really, a lot of our college admissions tools are used on Naviance primarily. So this is something that Ms. Castellano is going to go over a little bit more, but we are also always available to go over it with students specifically, depending on what they're looking for.
Ms. Bradley, one of the questions came in about Naviance, wondering about parents. Do they have access to log in?
Yes, parents have an account. They're more than welcome to reach out to their child's counselor, and we can reset their account for them so they can access it. This is great for parents and students to use. Oftentimes parents add colleges to like a kind of a draft thinking about list. As you can see, colleges I'm thinking about, oftentimes parents do add schools to that list as well. And as counselors, we do the same. So it's kind of all three, student, counselor, parent really working together through this platform, which is really great.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rebecca Castellano, and I welcome you this evening to continue the conversation about where your students are currently and where they're going to be moving into. So from the start of high school, since freshman year, we've been meeting with students to check in once a year formally and look at courses, grades, progress, and the planning for the following year. The junior year meeting has many of the same elements, and we also expand those elements to include the college search selection conversation. Now, in the past, those meetings have been on the shorter end, about 20 minutes, so that we can go have a chat about how this year is going and planning classes for next year. But seeing how this conversation adds the college piece, the college search, any questions that might have, or using the tools that we have available, we extend these appointments to about 45 minutes or as long as you need. Typically, they're done just with the student and the counselor, but families are always invited to be a part of the process. Students you will be getting information about when your appointments are. Again, they're scheduled between February 8th or February 6th and February 17th. And you'll get an email from Mrs. Mangieri, our office assistant, in terms of when your appointment will be. Families, you are more than welcome to join, whether it's in person or via Zoom. If that time doesn't work, we can always reschedule and make time to include you, or we could always do a follow-up appointment. So never feel like you don't have a counselor working with your family. We're here to work with students, and of course, families are a part of that experience as well. So that's just kind of the framework in terms of what that junior meeting looks like, but let's really look at what we will be doing and what we will be discussing. So when we take a look at the following, which is about to come up, there you go. This is a transcript. Everybody should have seen some form of a transcript at this point in time. At the junior year meeting, we're going to take a look at how you've gone from 9th to 10th grade, the classes that you're taking in the 11th grade. Take a look at that testing bank in terms of how many regencies you have done, how many regencies you need to do for the majority of juniors. It's going to be that US history and that English language. But again, we're going to be looking at you as the individual, knowing everybody's a little bit different. We're going to look at your GPAs, we're going to look at your credits, and we're going to use this as a launching to take a look at the kinds of courses that you're going to be taking the following year. So everybody is invited to take a look at their transcript on eSchool. If you can't get in or you have problems accessing it, let us know. We're more than happy to help you out. This planning sheet that's popping up right now, these are the nuts and bolts in terms of some of the work that we're going to be doing. Again, this is the first of several meetings that your counselor should be having with your student. So in this meeting, we're going to be looking at all of your credits and your classes and the graduation criteria, the diploma. All of those pieces are going to be set up for senior year. Then we're going to be looking and talking about SATs or ACTs, when to register, why to register, if you should register and test, and what to do with those scores. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation, but that's part of the conversation in this junior meeting. We're also going to take a look at your teacher recommendations. Now, this is not the letter of recommendation. This is looking at what teachers are suggesting you should take for senior year. Just a reminder, when teachers make recommendations, they make them independent of the other classes, meaning teachers don't know necessarily what other teachers are suggesting you should take as a senior. Having said that, you want to take the courses that fit best for you. Senior year is not the year to all of a sudden launch into too many AP classes. Balance. Balance has always been the mantra, it's been the message from the very beginning. Balance the things that you enjoy. Find your interests, explore those interests. Look at how we can explore those interests with you through the electives. All of that is going to be tied into how we're going to prepare you to launch post-high school. So we'll also look at electives as part of your course planning. On this list, we're going to be looking at Naviance and how to work Naviance, and we'll do a little bit of that together. We'll actually run through a Naviance search. Everybody's kind of in a different place with this. Some students need to start from the very beginning. Some students have already done a multitude of searches and have a list of schools. No one is in a bad place. No one is late to the game. Everybody needs to kind of tackle this at their own pace, which is why we make all this information available to you and why we make ourselves available to you throughout this year and throughout next year. So just to keep that in mind. So we'll start one search with you or two. We'll do what you need. And we'll also take a look at upcoming opportunities. Every year, whether we've done it on Zoom or we've done it in person, we've done interview workshops. And this is a fun opportunity to connect with a college representative who volunteers their time to do 10-minute sessions with our students. And they give real feedback in terms of how that student is presenting and what they can expect were they to do a real college interview late junior year or anytime senior year. So that's a great opportunity. We will post that experience. It comes in the spring. Essay workshops, the essay for the college Application is a different form of essay than students have been writing over the years. We'll talk a little bit about what that looks like, and we'll offer opportunities to start exploring and learning how to write that essay. We'll continue to support that work in senior year. Then, as I already mentioned, we'll do that college search. This last ticket item is about student participation clubs and activities, the resume. This is what we call the student profile. College admissions is about looking at the student in their totality, not just what you do in school, not just what your grades are, not just what your testing can be, but also what drives your interests. Are you a student that's participating in absolutely every club? That's exciting. And how do you show what you most care about? Where do you show that interest? How you show that interest is important. And that's part of the application. And that's part of telling your story. For those students who haven't been as involved or have never been involved, now's the time to start kind of picking at that and trying to see what you could be interested in so that we can round out your application. So again, we'll be having a chat about that. We'll be looking at how you spend your summer. We'll encourage you to research opportunities available to you. And then lastly, if you are a student athlete playing either Division I or Division II sport, we'll review your responsibilities in that process and how we can best support you. So it's a very comprehensive, can be a little bit overwhelming with all the information, first meeting. And again, it's the first. We'll be meeting throughout the spring. We'll be meeting throughout senior year. Let's get back into that presentation. Standardized testing options. Oh, let's actually do the Naviance College search. So as Ms. Bradley pointed out, everybody has access to a Naviance account. Students have their side of the portal, parents have their side of the portal. Students have much more control on their side. Parents can view a lot of the work that students have done. In the past, 9th, 10th grade, we did a lot of work on skills, who you are as a learner, how you go about approaching your schoolwork. We did college career searches to see what you're interested in, how that ties into college majors. It's all in those assessments. And if you want to, you can always redo them. This year, we focus on the college search. So the one that we like doing and the one that we think gives the best information is the advanced college search. So if you'll see, there's a tab that shows you the type, the location, the number of students, the selectivity in terms of admissions, sports, majors, cost of the program, and then specialized program. This is an opportunity to go shopping. You're going to fill your cart with schools that look interesting to you. There are thousands of schools out there. There are about 150 super popular names and so many more on top of that. This is an opportunity to use this tool, one of many that we have available in the office, to start looking for names, researching them. So when you find a school that you like, you give it a little heart, it pops into a list, and we'll explore that further. We will do a search with you. We will show you how this works. We will help you start creating a list of schools, and then you'll continue your research. Okay. Standardized testing options. It continues to be an option for this coming senior year class. So COVID hit, standardized testing kind of went by the wayside. Over the last few years, what we're hearing from college admissions counselors that are coming into our building and who are running professional development for us is that many of the schools are really enjoying being standardized or testing optional. So that if students feel that a test is or testing results are going to add to their application, they welcome the scores. Not having a score does not put you in jeopardy, but buyer beware. There are some schools that have gone back to testing. So always a conversation to be had with your counselor in terms of should I test and when should I test? There are calendars as to when the SATs and the ACTs are available. We'll share that calendar with you. We'll encourage you to think about scheduling an exam when there aren't a dozen other things going on, such as Regencies or APs or sports. A lot of our teams do well And in June, it's a hard time to schedule a standardized exam. So we'll look at that with you. We always encourage, if you are ready, to go ahead and take at least one and have those scores put aside in case you do use them or need them in the future. Again, if you're on the fence as to which one, if you're on the fence if you should or you shouldn't or when, that's a conversation we should be having so that we can come up with a good plan. That student profile, that last bullet, that's what I talked about before in terms of how do we broaden your application? How do we show the true you, your interests? Passion is a word that's used a lot in admissions. Passion isn't always about reinventing the wheel or doing something so extraordinary that you end up on the cover of a magazine. Passion is about your interests, what makes you tick, or discovering that. High school is where you start, college is where you continue. And so if we can start working with you to figure that out or continue to expand that interest, that's only going to add more depth to your application and hopefully bring you a lot of joy, because that's as important as the application. Moving forward, there's a lot planned for the spring of junior year. This is just an introduction. Moving forward, in the beginning of February, February 8th, we will have a panel presentation where we have representatives from, let me see if I remember them all, Bucknell, the University of Delaware, Western Connecticut State University, Binghamton, Gap Year Solutions, and a private consultant who had been a counselor, is now a private consultant who works within the community and in different organizations. They're going to come in and they're going to discuss and share their do's and don'ts, what the trends are in admissions as they're seeing it in their offices and what they're hearing in terms of their professional circles. They're going to speak to how to create a list of schools, how to diversify that list. What does it mean to have an academic fit? The nuances in terms of college admissions. I encourage you all to join that webinar or that Zoom, because it's an insightful way of learning about not just the schools that these counselors are representing, but the process as a whole, from large state universities to small private selective schools. So it runs the gamut and it's informative. I encourage you to be there. As mentioned, we have those individual junior meetings where we're always welcome to have a family there. Those will be running February 6th to the 17th. Please look for your emails from Ms. Mangieri. We will also have a list of those appointments in the school counseling office, so just reach out. They're not posted yet. We will be working on all of that through next week, so you should be getting something at the beginning of February. College fairs are a wonderful opportunity to learn about different schools, new schools, meet the representatives who are there to represent their schools, learn about admissions, learn the do's and don'ts. They're coming back in person. So the virtual visits were great. The in-person visits, better. There will be one in April. I believe it's April 26th. It's going to be at the Westchester County Center. It's the first time it's been back in the last 3 years. As we get closer to the date, we will post it in Schoology. We will send it on Instagram. We will send it to you in an email. Look for it, attend it. It's a great way of getting names and making connections. I spoke briefly about the college essay. In the spring, we'll be doing some work in terms of learning how to write that college essay. It's a narrative piece, which is a different form of writing. So we'll host workshops. Wendy Freed, our consultant and fabulous friend, is going to be coming in and doing those workshops or working with us to present that information. And then lastly, we will be doing a common application boot camp workshop. We did it for the first time this past summer. We had a small cohort of students come in, but they left feeling so much more in control of the process that we want to keep doing it. It's an opportunity late summer to start getting that application filled out. This is not something you should be doing now. This is something that you do senior year, and we work with you to get that done. And Mrs. Connell, you're taking over.
Thank you so much. Trying to get my mute button. So on this slide here, we're really looking into ways that parents can be involved in the process and support their child. Helping your student with organizing themselves through the process is really the greatest support a parent can offer. Students are busy and they have many other responsibilities that compete with their time, and helping them stay on task and meeting those deadlines can really help reduce their stress. Sorry about that. I just realized my video is not going either. There we go. In charge of all the buttons, and it's really hard to be the person in charge of all the buttons. Okay. So the other thing is, before students start making formal visits to campus, which I think is really essential. I know Rebecca had spoken about college visits in our office, but actually, excuse me, getting out on campus and seeing what those facilities look like, and getting a chance to sit in on classes, go to the different labs is really important. But before students start doing that, or any research begins, it's real important for families to sit down and really have a discussion about, what are your expectations? Are there limits in terms of how far you want your child to go, or how far they want to go?
Yeah.
Their financial concerns that the family wants to consider. It's never a good time in spring of senior year to let them know that their dream school is not possible given some of the family situations. So have those conversations early. Students can easily become attached to a school after they've been on campus or with meeting a representative, and it's difficult to have those conversations once they've had their minds made up. Working together to set up visits and gather resources is real important. While it is tempting as a parent to take the lead and to contact colleges and arrange visits, it's real important that your child be part of that process. And one of the recommendations I've often shared with my families is, try to have a check-in date. Maybe it's, one night during the week, maybe it's a Saturday or a Sunday morning, where you meet with your child together as a family and you talk about, some of the pieces of the application that need to be worked on, questions that you have, maybe a to-do list, speaking to that calendar that Ms. Winston had addressed earlier. And, that helps not have the conversation be every day about college, because I think oftentimes it can feel overwhelming when that's the only thing people want to talk to a senior about. Where are you going? What are you doing? What are your plans? And so having maybe just that weekly conversation can put things in perspective.
And at the same time, I would add, students, don't work in isolation. Your parents are there to work with you. You're the ones that are going to be doing the majority of the work, but they're there to support you. So if you're working in isolation and they don't know what you're doing, that's when some of the conflict arises. This is the experience we've seen in our offices. So do try and make time, schedule that time to have those chats so that everybody knows what's going on. And the parent worry often is it getting done, and is it getting done on time? If you're showing your work and you're including your folks in that, it kind of lessens that worry. It makes the process go that much smoother. Sorry.
Yeah, that's great. Real important. I think being a positive role model when, students often experience, a setback or maybe an unexpected outcome. If you're frustrated and angry or disappointed and you're sharing that in your, maybe even just your nonverbal expressions, it can be a message to the student. Maybe they feel that you're disappointed in them, or that they've been somehow wronged in the process, and it can make their behavior and their experience more negative and overwhelming than truly it has to be. So really, as parents, it's so important for us to be positive in the process and supportive, and be a good sounding board for our students. There will be times throughout the process where your student isn't following through, maybe on their end of their responsibilities. Maybe they haven't reached out to a teacher for a recommendation, or they haven't completed their essay. This is a great opportunity for families to reach out to the counselor. Keep us in the loop. Let us know what's happening. We can, bring the students in, check up with them, offer some support in school so they feel like they have some of the control of the process. But then there are also times that, they don't want to do anymore. You know, they are feeling as though that maybe this is heading in a direction that they're not sure they want to continue. So sometimes their behavior tells us more than actually their words. So it's an opportunity for us to really listen and to have those conversations with them. So when in doubt, communicate with the counselor. I think it's helpful to keep a list of questions. That's for students and for parents, whether it be when you're on a college visit, could it be, you know, in the middle of the day, you're thinking of something, perhaps maybe a representative has spoken with a student and they're not sure about, you know, a math course they've taken. It's always important to keep those lists of questions so that when you have an opportunity to meet with the counselor, or if the parents are doing their weekly check-in with their child, you have those questions available. As I said, you try not to have an ongoing conversation about college throughout the day. And lastly, really, as I said earlier, you know, trying to let the child take the lead in the process. I know it can be very daunting at times, and it's helpful to keep, you know, your child in tow, but you want them to be in control. Remember, you know, for those of them who learned how to drive, they didn't sit in the passenger seat while they, you know, experienced, you know, driving for the first time. We had to take that moment and sit in the passenger seat, let them be the driver as much as our heart was in our throats. And maybe, you know, they might've hit a few mailboxes or ran over the grass. It gave us, you know, the opportunity for them to learn, and it gave them the opportunity to experience. And I think that's really one of the most important messages we can leave with you. So the next slide really talks about some trends and some myths, and going to work with Ms. Castellano on this slide. And so, Ms. Castellano, can you speak a little bit about, you know, the early applications in terms of deadlines versus submission dates? And
Sure. So there's this thinking out there, or we've seen the phenomena, and our colleagues in Westchester have also seen some of the phenomena as well, around applying early. Now, let me just kind of go through. There are deadlines. There are early admissions deadlines. There's early decision deadlines. There are rolling deadlines. There are regular deadlines. It's overwhelming. And sometimes the instinct is get it done quick. Let's put it out there so that the application will be read first and chances of admission will increase. It's a myth. When we reach out to the colleges and universities, when we have the admissions counselors in our offices, when we go to our professional development at different universities and colleges, what the counselors tell us repeatedly is, nope, getting to the front of the line is just keeping that file on my desk that much longer. They will start reading those files as they get closer to their deadline, and they're not necessarily reading them in the order that they've been received. They get the files, they get distributed, and then they read them. A typical read can last anywhere between 7 to 10 minutes. 10 is generous. It's typically less than 10. So the rule of thumb is always put the best information in there. Now, having said that, even though it might feel good to put that application out there early, be mindful of the fact that the start of senior year, we're settling in. Students are settling into their senior classes. And what we see sometimes is movement within those classes. When students start to apply too early and we start moving classes around and our documents have been sent to the colleges and universities, now we're changing those documents. That's not necessarily a positive for that student. So think about that sort of issue that may arise. This is why the conversation with the school counselor is just as important as maybe that private counselor that you're working with and advising on when to apply. And when I use the term early, let me be very clear. Early deadlines, such as early decision and early action, typically happen November 1st, November 15th. The earlies I'm talking about are those applications for folk that want to go out end of September, beginning of October. Now, there are some Southern schools that work on a very different calendar. We're on a Northern calendar, so we start later. They start earlier. They might open up their admission cycle October 15th. we will certainly work with you to make sure that your information goes out there. And then we will work on pulling our stuff together so that we can support your application best. Again, always work with your school counselor so that she knows how to best support your timeline and address any concerns or worries that you may have if it doesn't go out that first week of school. That's not the best time to send anything out.
You had mentioned working with outside counselors,
Yeah.
and I have found that, of late, it seems to be more of a trend. And,
Yeah.
we're fine, we understand that, sometimes a second opinion or an outside person may have its place in the process. What are some of the challenges, though, that we as counselors have experienced in the last year or two, when sometimes there isn't open communication or there is a difference of opinion, if you will?
Right. So private counselors in college advising have been around for a long time, and they serve a wonderful purpose, especially if it becomes a very contentious experience at home. Having that private person outside of the home can be a benefit. It helps organize, it helps put it outside the home. It allows for that opportunity so that it doesn't become too stressful within your house so that you can work with somebody outside. I think all of that is really great. Often, though, those private counselors aren't having the same PD experiences or professional development experiences that the school counselors are having, because we're hosting over 150 sometimes college representatives in our offices through the fall and sometimes in the spring. They're the ones talking to us. We're the ones asking them questions about what trends they're seeing, what they're liking, what they don't want, when they want stuff submitted, when they don't want stuff submitted. So we're getting all that information, which we're happy to share out. And often the private counselors may not have that information. So good intentions are to give good advice, but it may not always fall in line with that college or university may want. It's often the case sometimes this year and years past, we've seen certain pieces of the application going out piecemeal. So it's not a cohesive unit, and that doesn't put the student in the best way. So again, it's like anything. Come back, circle around, work with your counselor, involve your family. Private counselors are great. I think they certainly serve a fabulous purpose, and I encourage it if that's what your family needs. At the same time, it shouldn't be done in isolation of the counselor.
That's great advice. Thank you. I'm thinking also about the diversity of the list, because often, we are hearing students saying, I really am interested in a selective group of schools. I think that if I apply to more of those schools, I'll have a better chance, rather than, diversifying my list and having some reaches and likelies. If I put all of my applications in highly selective schools, somebody's got to accept me. Is that right?
Well, that's the thinking, but it doesn't always pan out, and it often doesn't pan out that way. So selective schools are selective based on the fact that they're rejecting more than they're accepting. So the more students who apply, the more students that they deny, their rankings and selectivity continue to go up. So be aware. That's one piece. Not saying that they're not great schools. Of course, they're great schools. They're selected for a reason. They have fabulous programs in wonderful locations, and they're going to want more in that application. They're going to want that essay. They're going to want those supplements. And when you start, or students and families start applying to 20 or more schools of the same kind, that's the time that needs to be invested. Every application needs to have as much love and care from the 1st to the 20th, if that's the same pool of school that you'll be applying to. So throwing it all at the wall and hoping that something sticks is not a practice that we would endorse. Instead, take a look at the qualities of those schools, what works best for you. And then when we say diversify your list, absolutely go for those schools that you most want, the ones that really speak to you, and be open-minded to the ones that you may not know as well, but give them a chance. So that's just a piece in terms of diversifying that list. Got to go back.
Sorry. I accidentally hit the All right, my apologies. I was
Okay.
trying to hit something and I hit the wrong button. So there, one of the next items was SATs, and I was wondering if while you're
Mm.
talking about what is the myth behind, SAT optional? And, is it really optional? Or if you don't send in that score, is it going to hurt you? Are there students that are sending in those scores that have a better chance now because, they have a good score, and maybe by you not sending in, it's giving the impression that it's, perhaps you have a bad.
Right. So SAT scores were originated as a predictor exam. SATs were used to predict the success or the likelihood of success of a student that's going to be hitting that campus. And so higher the score, more likely the better predictability in terms of success, right? And the more selective schools are looking for those higher scores. Having said all of that, with now the move towards test optional, they really mean it when they say they're optional for those programs if that school is having that decision, the test optional piece. We heard a whopper this year, and I have to call it a whopper because I've never heard it said before. Somebody told me that they were advised that they have to take the SAT or the ACT because they're from Westchester. And if a college reads their application without SAT scores because they come from our area, then clearly they're not a good enough student. Not true, just not true. An application is a holistic review of the student. Those SATs or ACTs are one piece of a giant puzzle. Now, taking them, if you don't like your score, they're yours. You don't have to share them out. Not taking them and needing them, that's a different kettle altogether. So again, it's not going to hurt you if that school, it really is test option, and they really are. They wouldn't put that in there if they weren't. Just be mindful of the program, just be mindful of the rest of your application, and use that application to really talk about who you are as a student and what you want from that school. So again, every student is different. This is a generality. And when we meet with you, whether it's your first meeting or your fifth meeting, we can always review this. If you're a student who does take those exams and takes it more than once and wants to send those scores, maybe you send it to some schools and not all schools. There's strategies involved, and we can certainly help you with that.
Ms. Castellano, we have a couple questions surrounding SAT and ACTs. So the first one is, do you recommend an SAT prep course? What is the best time to take it? Who are the most reputable programs? And is the additional cost for a private one-on-one experience worth it versus a small group? So a loaded question.
That's a lot. Okay, so let me break this down. So we don't personally recommend one group over another group. On our website, which Ms. Bradley showed you, there's an ACT, SAT link. And so those are all the companies that are reputable. We've had good feedback from families that have used them. Private versus group. Now, this is where you need to know what kind of product is being sold and what works best for you. Typically, groups are held at a certain time on a certain day for an X number of weeks. So you really need to think about what works for your schedule and what works for your budget, which is we would encourage, call up, find out who offers what at what rate. In terms of how do I know? Whether it's SAT or ACT, which test should I kind of figure out? Juniors this year had an opportunity to take the PSAT. So you saw what those scores look like. You saw what that exam looked like. A lot of the testing companies will also offer free practice. Take it, it's free. Take the opportunity to see what that exam looks like. And then they're going to offer you their product, which is their tutorial. See if it works for you. Taking a practice doesn't mean that you're buying a product. You're just learning about the product. So go for it if you can fit it into your life. Private tutors, there are a host of people in our area that do private tutoring. Who's good, who's not? I think that's sometimes subjective in terms of the styles that are employed. So I can't really speak to that as much, but I encourage you to speak to others in your community to kind of figure out what worked best for their kid and why. But go ahead and vet those programs.
Ms.
All right.
Wynn, I think you have another question related to SATs as well. Would you like to take that one?
The SAT, ACT option, what is more heavily weighted criteria that they use to evaluate the applicant? Great question.
Wait. Ms. Winston was going to take that. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry, I didn't catch that.
That's okay. You
Go
didn't
for it, Miss Winston.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is really specific to the individual school, really. You know, as Mrs. Connell and Mrs. Castellano had spoken to earlier, many schools are remaining test optional and even going test blind. And some have gone back to requiring tests or for certain specialized programs. However, we're noticing the majority of schools are staying test optional. And some have not included test scores for many, many years, and have been able to holistically examine students' applications and successfully graduate a college class without ever having to include a test score in that process. So it's not an easy yes or no or black and white sort of answer to that question. It is individual to the school. There are some schools that have gone back, as I mentioned earlier, to requiring those scores, and it can be helpful and support an application. But as Ms. Castellano mentioned earlier, if you do not submit test scores, it's not going to necessarily work against a student. Ultimately, and historically and currently, the most important parts of the application are always going to be the high school transcript. So we're finding that these standardized test scores are holding less weight in the application process, in the admissions decision. How much weight they hold, also again, depending on the school. So it's not a simple answer, but we're finding that these tests are not the end all be all of the admission process and of students being accepted to schools. So I would say not to hold too much stock in it, but as Ms. Castellano mentioned, if you have the opportunity to take the test, especially with a lot of the free resources that are available, such as the mock exams, the diagnostic testing that students can take for free to see if they do well on an SAT or an ACT or which one they do better on, trying those things out, I think is very helpful to see if it's worthwhile and to go that route. Or maybe you want to focus on your extracurriculars. Maybe you want to focus on a certain rigor in an academic areas of strength. So every student is different. Every student is going to have a different plan and strategy, and that works for them. And SAT and ACT is not for every student, and it could be for some. So I know that was not a perfect answer, but this is where we are right now in 2023.
Ms. Bradley, I'd like to bring you back as well. And I'm wondering, when you think about gathering information around the application and what the requirements are, I have on here a bullet point around college websites. Can you speak a little bit to, how important or not important, it is to look for that information and, maybe some experience that you can attach to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's our jobs to know the college admissions process. But that being said, we don't know every single admissions requirement for every single college in this country. So there's a lot of schools, and my brain especially is not big enough for that. So it is really important that students do their and families do their own research on the specific schools' websites. Some schools require certain things such as, there are a couple, actually multiple schools that require a certain amount of years of lab sciences, or, they may require Algebra 2, or there's different requirements in that academic sense, or a GPA requirement. So that's really something to look into. The school's websites are really the most accurate, the most up to date. So it is important for students to do their own research on that. I often look at their websites as I don't have, all of their information memorized. So this is definitely really important for them to check those requirements themselves.
And I'll just add, Ms. Bradley, this is a great opportunity to reach out to the admissions counselor for students to connect with them and ask those questions directly. Obviously, if they don't have that information listed on the website, that's your next best resource. It's also connecting you to the admissions counselor, putting a name and a face together for them. So if they're reading your application and they see that name, they're like, oh, I recognize that student. I spoke with that student. It's good to start building that relationship. And also being able to reach out and ask those questions and get the answers specific to those colleges, because again, it is specific to each individual college.
Mhm.
Ms. Castellano, do you want to answer this question? I will read it out loud. How much does a student taking honors or AP classes strengthen their application?
Sure. So this is not, the colleges will ask the following questions. Did the student take appropriate advantage of the curriculum that's being offered? Having said that, appropriate advantage of the curriculum being offered is not every AP and honors class that we have to offer. It is really hard to manage a course load that is just stocked with APs and honors classes. Now, some students, very few students can do that, and that's great. We celebrate that. Do it. If that feeds you and you can manage the time, the effort, the consistency around it, then that's something that we will certainly support. But it's not a lot of people that can do that. And senior year is not the year to say, all right, let me try it out. I've never done it before. Putting those AP classes on your transcript or on your schedule is one piece. But now you have to meet the goal of the AP class. It's about managing the workload, managing the independence, and not 1, 2, 3, however many it is that you choose. So your question is not an easy yes or no. It's who the student is, where their interests are, where the challenge can be found. If you're rocking the house in Regents level courses, and you're really interested and you really want to try that AP level because you want to see what it's like being taught in a first-year college level course at the high school, go for it. Go ahead and take that opportunity. If you're not performing at super high levels or well in those AP classes, and well is subjective, and again, that's a private conversation depending on the schools you're applying to and what your performance is, then that's something that you really need to reconsider. So it matters, and what matters most is how that student is performing. Now, this next question about sending AP scores, typically you don't send AP scores as part of the admissions. There's a question about, do students have the option of sending AP scores to the colleges for admissions? That's not what AP scores are for. AP scores are used for college credit. And so after you've gained admissions, it's typically when you share those scores to decide what kind of credit you're going to get.
Ms. Winston, one of the bullets that we didn't address yet is around letters of recommendation. Can you speak to, what colleges are looking for in terms of those letters of recommendation? And is it, to a student's advantage to have multiple letters of recommendation, outside recommendations from, their coach or their boss, or, just a teacher recommendation? What are your feelings about that?
So I'll reiterate what Ms. Bradley said earlier about the colleges having different requirements. Some colleges don't accept any letters of recommendation whatsoever. So we don't even have the ability to send them. However, some will require a counselor letter that's fairly common and at least one teacher letter of recommendation. And those things really give different points of view on who that student is. Counselor letters speaking more to a student's character, things they've been involved in, explaining, extenuating or special circumstances, classes they may not have been able to take because of scheduling issues, things that they wouldn't be able to speak to in their application. Also, in a teacher letter, they're speaking to that student in an academic setting, as a student in their classroom. And these letters both should add something to the application that's not already part of the application. You don't want it to be redundant. You want it to be something that's supplementing and supporting the application and not repeating a resume, not repeating the activities they've already mentioned. You want to add to the application and help the student stand out and make a stronger application for that student.
Thank you. I know the last topic is the depth and breadth of the student profile. Ms. Castellano, you've spoken to that in some degree throughout the presentation. You want to just kind of button it up for us?
Sure. So as mentioned earlier, that file review is brief. I mean, you're pouring your heart into it, and we hope that you're putting everything that you can into it. And again, that admissions counselor is going to open it up and is going to give you about 7 to 10 minutes, 10 minutes tops, not often, to read your file. So just like those letters of recommendation in terms of giving them the best information about you and keeping it brief, 1 or 2 letters at most, 2 if you really need it, that depth and breadth of student profile is really talking to the activities or the experiences that you have. College admissions counselors tell us flat out, they're not reading the 20 things that are listed. They're taking a look at the top ones that are posted up there. So for the student that hasn't involved themselves in 10 different things or 7 different things, and they worry that it's just not enough, I would rather challenge that and talk about the ones that you have been involved with. How have you shown your interest? How have you grown as a person or as a student? Because that's going to be more meaningful than writing down a dozen different things that you've jumped from one event to another from, because they can see that there's only so much time in a day, and there's only so much time in a day when you're doing all of that and your classes and everything else that you have to do as a teen. So, depth and breadth is really about who you are as a person, what brings you joy, and what interests you have.
Thank you. I'm looking in our Q&A. I do believe that we have addressed the questions that have been entered.
Yeah.
If there's anything else anybody would like to ask of us now, that's fine. We'd love to address those questions. If not, just to wrap it up, I want to remind everybody that in February, councils will begin meeting with their students upon conclusion of midterm exams. When your report card gets posted to the portal, we will also post an updated transcript. That transcript will have the grades for any completed courses at the end of the first semester. So if a student doesn't have, if they're all full year courses, your junior year transcript at this point won't be much different than what it was in June of sophomore year. We've also removed, for the purposes of college applications, the Regents exams. So those are not posted on the transcript to the portal. The counselors will review the profile with the student during the meeting, but those are not included on the transcript that's posted to the portal because we're live at this moment. And when we're sending out transcripts and mid-year reports for seniors to college, we have moved away from including the Regents scores at least for the next year or two, primarily because of the exemptions. This particular graduation class had more exemptions than they had scores, and therefore it really wasn't information that was helpful. And we did reach out to colleges, most particularly the SUNY schools, who are familiar with the Regents, and they said that it is not an issue in terms of reviewing the applications. And if they do need those scores, they would reach out to us and let us know. So I do want to share that information with folks and encourage you, if you would like to be part of those junior meetings, to reach out to Ms. Mongeri, our office assistant, or the student counselor as well. We'd be happy to have you at those meetings, and we can set it up virtually as well. So if you're looking to participate from your office and your child is in the school, that's fine. We can make that happen. I'm not seeing anything else in the Q&A. Thank you so much for joining us. I apologize for some of my tech issues this evening. And that concludes our program.
Thank you. Thanks for attending.